Rangers goal. His third of the game, 15th of the season, his 5th career hat trick, scored by number 10, Artemi Panarin.
All right, we'd like to give a very special welcome to the Rangers Ed podcast. The voice of the Garden, Joe Tolleson. What's up, Joe?
How's it going, guys? Thanks for having me.
Was that a good impression, or does he need some work?
I wouldn't know. It's all I blame it all on my parents. It's all genetics.
I do it better when I'm not on the screen, honestly, because I literally walk around my house saying Rangers goal scored by, and you're the inspiration for that. So
I'm glad you said you're better when you're not on screen and not when you haven't had it. You know, you need to have a few in you to make it work.
We can ask his wife her opinion on which sounds better, I guess.
No, don't, because she'll just say, "Why do you always do that? Why do you have to? What are you doing?" But anyway, so yeah, Joe Tolleson, the voice of the Garden, Rangers PA announcer. So I mean, look, first of all, thank you so much for coming on our podcast.
Yeah, no problem.
Means a lot. But I'm just curious, how did you get to the point of being the PA announcer for the New York Rangers? Like, give me like a brief history to like how you got to that point.
I wish I had a long, really cool story. But really the lesson here is, and it's, once in a blue moon, they have me talk to like kids at schools or something. And what I talk about really is the value of building and maintaining relationships. And that's kind of what happened here. There used to be a senior VP within the Rangers, a guy by the name of Mark Piazza, who I knew years ago when I was still in college. And he actually was in the PR department with the Philadelphia Flyers. And I got to know him there because I was doing some stuff I was at the University of Maryland, and I was actually working part-time for the Capitals for the coaching staff, which actually what we did is what's now the NHL hit system. So you go online now and you get all the ice time, you get the hits, you get face-offs, you get all that information. And it was this computer system, a portable computer, which was about the size of one of those big legal briefcases. And you'd set it on its side and you'd flip the bottom out, and that was the keyboard. And then you had this little screen, and they had to have, and it was still like an old TV screen kind of thing, but it was really tiny. And we actually used a light pen to do the line changes and everything. But I was doing that at the time, and that's when I got to know him. And the only thing I really chuckle about that whole experience, Brian Murray was head coach of the Capitals at the time, and he was very adamant that we do not let anybody know a single second of ice time that any player had. And now you go online in the middle of the game and you don't only find out how much ice time they've played, whether it's even strength, shorthanded, power play time, whatever. It's a very different world now. But back to the original thing. So Mark Piazza was in Philly. We got to know each other as I moved on in my career, and a lot of what I did, regardless of where I was working, all the way up to when I was at WFAN, even if I had to take vacation, I would go out to the NHL All-Star game. That was just kind of one of the things I did every year. I'd take the 3-4 days, go out to the All-Star game, hang out with a bunch of people, and basically network. And I would see Mark there on occasion. He'd always like, "Hey, what's going? How's your career going?" And at one point, he's like, "I'm in New York now." And cut to November of 2002. And I was working at WFAN at the time, doing updates, doing the 2020. And I'm typing my update on a Friday morning, and the phone rings. And the guy across from me says, "Yeah, hold on a second," and looks at me and says, "There's a Mark Piazza on the phone?" Because that's when Mike was with the Mets. I said, "I know who he is. I have no idea why he's calling." And they had apparently just gone through a whole big audition over the summer and had hired a new PA guy that wasn't quite working out. And he called up and asked if I'd be interested. And that's pretty much how I got the job. It was definitely one of those who gets you the job. I'd like to think what I know and the job I've done since then has kept me in the job. But that's how I got it. People are like, "How do you get to be a PA announcer?" I said, "I wish I could tell you. They called me."
No idea. No, that's actually more interesting of a story, or more than if you had a longer one, I think. So,
yeah. Well, I mean, but the one thing I would say to people, if this is something they're interested in doing, find someplace and go do it. That's how you're going to move up the ladder most of the time. is that you're doing it somewhere and you've had a few reps and you can can go in and show you can do the job. I'd done a little bit of PA here and there throughout my career at some places, some minor league baseball, did some stuff when I was in college kind of thing, but nothing regularly. But so I would just tell people, if it's something you want to do, go find your local high school. If there's a local college nearby, find out if they need a PA guy and see if you can do the job.
Yeah, that's good
Coach,
advice.
what were you going to ask?
I have two quick questions. One is, you said you kept track of hits.
Well, the whole system we had, it was hits, it was face-offs, it was giveaways, it was takeaways. There's about 11 people who run that system now. I think there were 4 of us who did it for the Capitals.
So our question is, we kind of debate this because they always say Trouba had 4 hits this game or something like that. In the meantime, we're watching the game. It looks like he had like 10 hits. So what constitutes a hit?
Well, it is a very subjective category, without question. And for everybody out there who plays fantasy hockey, if you really pay attention to what's going on, like the one thing I have noticed, I've been in a fantasy hockey league with some guys for about 10 years, place I used to work. They're like, hey, why don't you get in? I'm like, okay. I may have won it 3 or 4 or 5 times in those 10 years, but I don't want to brag.
Subtle brag.
But the one thing I will tell you, if you have any LA Kings on your roster and anybody's playing, there's a good chance if it's a home game for the Kings, maybe they might get an extra hit or 2. I don't know. It's what it seems to be sometimes. And I joke about the Kings because they're coming up next at the Garden, but I think you get that a little bit around the league. As much as the league would like to say it's all impartial, I know all the guys I know who do that say it's all impartial. But sometimes I think your belief of what was a hit might differ based on the team. But that said, they've made a lot of changes in that. Not to go down a rabbit hole on this, the league's made some changes in it, and they actually have a third party that kind of audits the game. And they will go back and tell the guy sometimes between periods and stuff, hey, you had a hit here, you had a giveaway there, you had this guy as a face-off when you should change that, or you should add something. So they're really particular about how they're doing everything now.
That must be because of gambling.
Part of it, I would think. But for me, when I was at the Capitals for the coaching staff there at the time, their big thing was they wanted it to be a play on the puck. Not just, a guy on the off wing, the play's going down the right wing, he's over on the left side. And this is, back when you could hit guys left and right and not get penalties for it. And a guy, would just kind of run his body into somebody. They're like, that's not a hit. We want hits that are, germane to the play and are actually making stuff happen. So that was kind of the delineation there.
So maybe finishing your check, they're not really counting as one. So
if it doesn't have a direct impact on the play, that could be, if the guy's already gotten rid of the puck.
My other quick question was, thanks for that explanation. It clarifies a lot for us. While you were at FAN, did you know Don Imus?
We knew each other. Yeah, he actually made some very favorable comments about me on the air one day, which I was happy about. But yeah, we would cross paths. The big thing I would always talk to him about, because was one of his passions that he really liked, was photography. And he had put out a book one time with a lot of his photography, and I asked him a couple of questions about some of the shots and how he did it, and he was really open to discuss that.
Yeah, I was a big fan of his.
So
that's interesting. He was as good as nice as he seemed to be, to people around him.
Well, at least when I talked to him about photography.
Cool.
So, Joe, you kind of answered this. I mean, you gave us a story of how you became the Rangers PA announcer, but what exactly did you want to be when you were growing up? Is this you wanted to be in the media, or like what exactly were your plans before you got that call?
Well, at one point in high school, I thought I was going to go to law school. And then my dad was in the military. He was in the Marine Corps, and I was the youngest of 3. And midway through my junior year, he retired, and we moved from North Carolina back up to Virginia. That had kind of been home base. We'd lived there for a couple years, and we'd move somewhere, then we'd come back. But that's where they decided to retire. So I went back to a high school there, and I was in the middle of the school year. And the way my schedule worked out, I had an open class and I needed to fill it with a semester class. And they offered me gourmet cooking or radio, television, and film. And I thought I was an okay cook to begin with, and I didn't know if I needed to be a gourmet cook and learn how to do it in high school. So you can guess, I took the radio, television, and film, and then I decided that was something I really liked doing. Went to the University of Maryland, worked at the campus radio station there. And one of the things which I ended up doing for a few seasons, backing up for Kenny Albert, when Don LaGreca and I were doing it together, he would do some games, I would do some games. But really what I wanted to do was play-by-play. Was NHL play-by-play. I did it for a little bit, like I said, but I've kept involved in the game and doing what I'm doing now, and it's a lot of fun, and I like it.
Yeah, you seem like you're having a lot of fun on Instagram recently. Your video. No, I love you. I love your videos. You get to fans that don't get to go to the game; they get to experience it firsthand. So, I think you do a great job with that.
I'm glad, because I'm still trying to figure out what the heck I'm doing.
Hey, I mean, sometimes you just got to keep it simple, and that's exactly what you do. That's all the fans want. They just want to hear your voice and see the microphone.
I've been watching your videos, trying to figure out exactly where do you sit and make those announcements.
We're up on the 8th floor. We're up on the 8th floor. It used to be at the scorers table before the pandemic. And then when the pandemic hit, the league wanted as few people down at the scorers table as possible to minimize exposure for people. So we got booted out, and they haven't brought us back yet anywhere, at least anywhere in the league, as far as I'm aware of. So I'm up on the 8th floor looking down with everybody else.
Is that up on the bridge?
Is it up in the 200s?
Oh, okay. We're in 322 up on the, I guess, the west balcony technically.
Okay, so then I'm probably right underneath you.
Yeah. Gotcha.
So how does that work, Joe? When, like, say the goal score, the referees report it to the scorer's box, where they send it up to you on a screen? How does that work?
Well, the actual
delay.
The actual official score and everybody, they're actually up in the media area up on the 10th floor. So they do everything from there. And for goals, they give me a call. Really where it affects me and where I really miss being down at the scorers table is when you have just kind of one of those plays where you have multiple penalties, where in the past, if I was right down there, I'd be right next to the off-ice officials, and the referee would say, okay, this guy gets 2 minutes for roughing. That guy gets 2 minutes for roughing. That guy gets unsportsmanlike conduct. This guy over here gets a slash and a misconduct and whatever. And I could write it all down the same time they do. Now they have to get that information. And the first thing they need to do is call it up to the people running the computer system and make sure they have everything in the system. And then I get a call. So it's pretty delayed. And that's why sometimes there's a big delay between an event happening before we actually make the announcement.
So any interesting stories when you were sitting down by the scorer's table down?
I wish I'd taken better notes, Ed. I really would. I'd have a pretty good book, I think, if I'd taken better notes. But the big thing is, I remember a lot of the stories. I remember the stories. But I don't always remember exactly who the two guys were. And sometimes was it? Let me think, how far back was it? Maybe this, before they started announcing penalties and everything. Kerry Frazier was, that's really probably one of the other things I really miss is the interaction, believe it or not, with the referees and the linesmen. Because I know a lot of times in a game, something happens and the fans don't like what the refs do. By and large, as a group, they're a bunch of really nice guys. So I miss the interaction that I've had with a lot of those guys. But one night, Kerry Frazier comes over to me. And he goes to 2 minutes, points on the player. I go, what is it? He goes, tripping, hooking, take your pick. And then he pauses and he goes, so what'd you pick? I said, tripping. He said, why? I said, because that's the first one you said.
Oh man!
So that kind of things. There was another one. I wish I could remember the guys' names. It was a preseason game with the Flyers. And maybe Aaron Voros, but don't hold me to that. But two guys get in a fight, preseason game, get to the penalty box. And normally as a fan or somebody, you think, oh, these guys just must be livid at each other. They're throwing punches at each other. They just got to hate one another. And they sit down, and the guy on the Flyers looks over, he goes, hey, thanks for going with me, man. I really need to show the coach I could do that. He goes, oh, no problem. I needed to get one in myself. It was like they just finished playing tennis. It was the most bizarre conversation.
That's a great story.
Incredible.
Quick little workout.
Yeah, that's a
Oh,
typical
man.
hockey fight, right? That's awesome. Especially in a preseason game too, because that's like a great explanation. That's awesome.
The other fun one, and I know it's not one of the favorite sons at the Garden, but it was actually just a few seasons ago. There was a guy in one of the expensive seats right outside the penalty box. And it just happened to be one of those games where Sidney Crosby ended up in the penalty box a couple of times, and this guy was relentless on just chirping at Sidney Crosby. And then right towards the end of the game, he reaches out with one of his sticks and tells one of his guys, go over and give that guy the stick. There was probably about 40 seconds left in the game. And I went in to talk to him afterwards. I said, I've never seen that. I said, you know what I liked about it? He was chirping and all, but it was good fun. And he never once cursed. He was aware of like people who were around him. He goes, what I hate is the guys that just mother F you and everything else.
Yeah.
And there's an 8-year-old kid 2 seats down. He goes, I hate that. He goes, the guy was completely clean. He was kind of funny. And I, figured why not? So, and he,
That's
so
great.
a guy, some good natured ribbing, got a Sidney Crosby stick to show for it.
That's cool as hell.
I remember that. Maybe he's done that more than once, but I do remember Crosby doing something like that. So.
Yeah, he's a class act, Crosby.
He's again, I know people, Ranger fans aren't big Sidney Crosby fans. Again, another guy who is just, like you said, class guy, super nice guy. Yeah. I first got to meet him when he was still playing with Rimouski in the Quebec League. This is the kind of wife I have. It was during the lockout back in 2004 or whatever, and I convinced my wife to go to Lewiston, Maine for Valentine's Day. And she goes, well, what's it? I said, well, I figure we go to Maine with this nice wintry scene. They have some outlets there. She goes, what else is going on? I said, Sidney Crosby may or may not be playing in a junior hockey league game. She goes, I like hockey. I'll go. That's okay. And it was, and the team's not there anymore. It was the Lewiston Maniacs. And I didn't remember this. Sidney Crosby reminded me of this when I went in and said, hey, why the stick and all that? And I said, you probably don't remember. I said, the first time I talked to you, you were playing with Rimouski, and it was a game in Lewiston, right? It was actually the day that they announced the season was going to be canceled. And he answered, 100 questions that he'd probably been asked every day for the last 2 weeks. And he answered every single one of them like it was the first time he'd heard the question. He really was savvy and media savvy beyond his years. But so I'm recounting this to him that night, and he goes, you remember who their goalies were? I said, well, I think Bernier played that night. He goes, yeah. He goes, you remember the other one? I said, I don't. He goes, Yaroslav Halak. He goes, think about having to go up against that, Bernier or Halak, depending on any given night.
Wow.
So it's funny the stuff those guys remember. But yeah, so my wife was more than happy to go to Lewiston, Maine with me. And it was like going into that arena was like you could put a scene from Cheers or something like that in there. Because it was like, hey, Jimmy's here. Hey, everybody walked up. And it was funny. We sat down and I told my wife, I said, I'm going to run up to the press box. I'm going to get some notes just so I can have a roster and kind of keep along. And she said, you walked away. She goes, I must have had 15 questions. What team does he scout for? Who does he scout for? Who's he looking at? She's like, he doesn't scout. He's a P. No. Who's he scout for? He goes, that's a clever backstory to say he's a PA announcer somewhere, but no. Who's he scout for? And unfortunately, that was the truth. I was just there to watch the game. I always thought it was funny. To me, I would have loved to have been one of those guys in that game because people are there because Sidney's there, and that was a chance to get looked at. The other memorable thing from that game, and not to dwell on Sidney Crosby playing for Rimouski in Lewiston, Maine, but the whole game there was a guy behind me who every time he touched the puck, he'd yell, Sidney, you're not that good. Oh. And I think he had 2 goals and 2 assists in the game. And I looked at my wife at one point. I said, at what point can I turn around and go, excuse me, sir, I believe he is. She goes, please don't. I want to get out of here alive.
Yeah. Oh, man. That's
so you're
great.
you're just like us. You're just like us, and we're sitting at the Garden.
Yeah. Absolutely.
You got to hear people say certain stuff, and they have no idea what's going on.
You're gonna have to give me some tips because I'm trying to get my wife to go to Chicago the weekend before Valentine's Day for the Rangers Blackhawks game. So,
talk about the scenery. Talk about the scenery.
That should be an ezy sell. Going to Chicago, there's a lot to do. Here's where you paint yourself into a corner. You can't You can't fly in Saturday morning for a Saturday night game and leave Sunday morning. You need to add another day or two there so you can actually go out and enjoy Chicago a little bit.
Right, exactly. I like that. See, that's good advice. That's good advice. So look, everybody recognizes your voice. It's epic, and all Rangers fans know it. I'm just curious when the Rangers are playing, say, I'm just gonna pick a random team, Minnesota. You get the roster. Is there ever a time where someone from Minnesota has to come and actually tell you how to pronounce the name correctly, or do the players request how to pronounce their names?
Well, a couple of that, yeah. But the league does actually put out a pronunciation guide that you can go through and check the pronunciations. When I first started, they didn't have that, and I would go around before a game and see if I could find, somebody from their PR department and just go over the entire roster. I did that with one team. I couldn't find the guy, and somebody helped me find him. And I introduced myself. I said, look, I just go down the entire roster. I mean, even if it's, Jim Smith, I just read every name. And we finished. And as I walked away, I heard him tell the guy who helped me find him. He looked at me and said, I wish our PA guy would do that. But so that was nice to hear. And that was, it was when I first started. So it was like 20 years ago. So I don't even know what the situation is in different cities because I'm one of the longer tenured guys, I think. But now there are a couple things. They have the pronunciation guide, and there's actually a Facebook group that we have with a bunch of the PA guys that we can kind of exchange different pronunciations. But really, the big thing for me is guys deciding how they want it to be pronounced. Especially the European guys. Are they going to kind of anglicize or North Americanize the pronunciation a bit? Ronald Petrovitsky came to the Rangers. His older brother Robert played in the league. I was doing some games up in Hartford for MSG for the Hartford Wolfpack on TV, and his brother was playing for Springfield. And we were doing a pregame interview, and I said, "Oh, and your name's Petrovitsky." He goes, no, I've been here long enough. You can say Petrovicky. And you could tell just by the tone of his voice that it was, I'm just tired of correcting people. So if people say Petrovicky, I don't care. So then his brother signs with the Rangers, and I'm saying Ronald Petrovicki, and about 2 games in, one of the PR guys comes to me and says, "Hey, was talking to Ronald." I go, "He wants Petrovitsky." He goes, "Yeah." But I said, "No problem." I said, tell him to talk to his brother.
So other than that one, no, go ahead, cuz.
No, I was going to say that probably happens a lot with Russian players too, right? Like Igor Shesterkin in Russian, I've seen it spelled Shesterkin, and then he chose, I guess, Shesterkin, right? So how did that?
Yeah, it depends on, at least from the little I know about like Russian pronunciation, like Panarin, it should be Artemi. Like it's kind of the E's are kind of a yeah kind of thing, Igor Shesterkin kind of thing. It can be tough when you're doing it, but
you're throwing the accent around.
But for me, it's a lot of, and actually some of the Eastern European languages, once you learn the pronunciation rules, like Slovakian and Czech and stuff, it was funny. I came across, I think it was a website that had pronunciation for, how to pronounce stuff in Slovak. And the person leads off, he goes, "The Slovakian language is one of the easiest to pronounce as they have 42 distinct letters." And I'm thinking 42, but the key word in that whole sentence was distinct. And where you run into things, especially with, like the Czech and Slovak and that, is some of their letters have the little diacriticals, where it's like the little U-shaped thing above it or a squiggly thing down below, or accents and all. And that depends on how you pronounce, like C's in their language. For us, we see a C, it's C's a C. Well, they have like 4 different letters that look like a C, or 3. And it's whether it's a K or a Ch or a Ts. I don't know if you guys remember, there's an Ottawa defenseman way back, Stanislav Netskash, that was spelled Neckar. And John Muckler was the coach in Ottawa at the time. He'd always say, "Oh, well, Necker, Neckar's been really good for us on the blue line." But if you get the little diacriticals over the letters, and you know that how that's pronounced, it's Netskash. And I think the big thing on the foreign guys is you just have to take a step back and realize you can't read it like you would in English, and figure out how they say it in their language.
That's great.
Yeah.
So, are there any current Rangers that you had to learn or ask about? I guess, or double check yourself. I should say. Maybe?
Well, anybody who's new, I check. I'll readily admit if I hadn't checked and hadn't heard about it. But if you put Cuylle in front of me, I don't know that Cooley's the first thing that comes out of my mouth. But that's what it is. So
It's true. Yeah, that's a
good one.
I guess in the past, what was the hardest one to learn how to pronounce, or was there any? You gave us a non-Ranger story. Was there any Rangers ones that you had to change up or learn?
I mean, not really. I mean, I know I've told the story before. The bigger one, one was Lundqvist, because when I first talked to him, he said he wanted Lundqvist. And so I was saying Lundqvist, and then people asked why, team officials were saying, why are you saying Lundqvist? And I said, that's how he said his name's pronounced. And they went and checked. They went and checked with him, and he said, in North America, it's probably easier to go with Lundqvist, so that's fine. So that's what and then different stuff like like with the Petrovitsky or Petrovicki. Again, it's more how much they want to kind of North Americanize the pronunciation of it. But and there's always just some names are fun. Somebody commented last night, and it's Brodzinski's kind of fun. Really, the names now, which ironically we don't have any on the Rangers, it seems like the Finnish names are the ones that are a lot of fun to kind of to figure out, and if you don't really watch out, could be tongue twisters.
You got Kakko.
Pekka Luukkonen. Yeah. But not he does his is a nice easy kind of Kakko. Yeah. And you find here's what this is fun. I was searching around and found some guy. It was a Finnish guy saying this is the proper way to pronounce Capo Kakko, and I actually kind of integrated it into if he's in the starting lineup because it fits better to have the little pause. But he said you're actually supposed. It's almost like you hit a speed bump when it's the two K's together. So it should be Capo Kakko. So
you say it twice.
It's Finnish. That you hit cock and you stop for a second. Capo Kakko. And it's just like a little hesitation in the middle there.
So. All right, so Joe, it sounds like your wife is involved a little bit in your career. You dragged her into it. Does she ever give you a little criticism, like why'd you say it like that, or maybe you should do this? Or
no, she stays out of it there. She does. Nice. She definitely stays out of it there.
No compliments, no nothing. Just lets it go, huh?
She is a supportive wife. You're the best, kind of thing. But really isn't. I don't get. It's not a sit down session for a critique.
You don't walk around the house like You don't walk around the house.
You know what? I don't.
Wow.
And I prefer not to. I've never really sat there and said, okay, how am I going to say this guy's name now? I just Jaromir Jagr started. I'm like, and it's just I was right before I had to announce him, and I will readily admit when I first started to announce it, had a little voice in my head from one of the Hanson brothers saying, "Coach, we're just trying to make it look mean." When they're hitting the bus and slap shop, and in my brain, it was let's make him sound mean. So instead of like Jaromir Jagr, I was like, number 68, Jaromir Jagr.
I like
that's awesome.
Let's make him sound mean, kind of thing.
That's great.
So it's more fun things like that. The whole Henrik Lundqvist, I was trying to reach the scream in the Who song. We were using, I guess it was Won't Get Fooled Again by the Who, where right at the end of it, you have this big scream from Roger Daltrey. And at that point for starting lineups, give all the players, and in goal number 30, Henrik Lundqvist, and then he'd scream. And one day it seemed like it was the shortest name of every player on the team you could pick. It was 5 Mark Stalls kind of thing that we're playing. And I get to a point and I'm like, I have like 8 or 9 seconds before that scream, and what do I do? And I just said, and that's where it all came out. And in goal, number 30, Henrik Lundqvist. And it was all just to get to Roger Daltrey screaming. I had never planned it that way. And I finished, I turned off the mic, and the game director in the headset said, keep doing that.
Yeah,
I kept doing it.
It was always epic when you did it. Yeah, that's I like the way.
But it wasn't. I wish in some ways I could say I sat around and thought this is the way it should happen. I try and see if you kind of get a feeling from the building, and kind of a vibe of what's going on, if that helps a little bit, and maybe tweak things, as things have gone on with Mika. Maybe I drag out Mika a little more than I used to in the past, but maybe part of it too is, what can we do to switch it up a little bit just to have some fun and keep it interesting?
Yeah, that was kind of our next question, is if you let the emotion or the ups and downs of the games kind of, I don't know, influence the way that you announce the goal.
Probably more the ups. I think on the downs, you don't want to get too down with everybody else as well. And see if there's a moment, if it's every once in a while, there's a rough night. I did, and I think what fans have to remember, for the most part, if they lose 3-2 or 3-1, or they lose 7-1, it may look bad, but at the end of the night, it's a loss. And this is the league that if you lose 27, 28 games, you had a pretty damn good season. And the thing, I think to remember there, and sometimes you see the guys like, wow, how can they just put it behind you? And I think you have to, because over the course of an 82 game season, if you beat yourself up over every loss, I think you'd go crazy by about game 50 or 60. And I think you just have to say, hey, there's nobody's gone 82-0 in this league ever. And I don't know that anybody's ever going to do it. So when you lose a game, you just have to say, hey, we lost one. And again, another player that when I was at WFAN, I covered the Devils a bunch. And a guy who was really good at it, and I think that's why he was one of the best in the game, was Martin Brodeur. And I think that's the attitude that players have to have, is that's over. If I dwell on it, I can't sit here all night and go, what should I have done if I did this better? And suddenly the score is going to change, at midnight or 1 o'clock in the morning. You lost 5-2. You lost 5-2. That's never changing. So let's look ahead to the next one. Yeah, learn the lessons from what happened. But I think the guys that are really, really good are the guys who can put a poor performance behind them and come out the next day and not let it affect them.
Well, we were all at the Garden for the Sabres game last week. And what was that, a 4-1 loss?
Trap game on the schedule, right?
Yeah. Well, what I wanted to say is that we at least got to hear one goal. At least you're not going home with a shutout, and it was a Miku goal, and you nailed the announcement. So, I mean, at least you like you're kind of saying, like, even with a loss, I mean, you're able to bring some joy to the fans, I think.
Well, hopefully, and overall, again, the one thing that I definitely go into every game very comfortable in the fact, I don't believe there is a single person there who bought a ticket to the game because I'm the PA announcer. You bought a ticket to the game because you want to see the New York Rangers play hockey. And, in my position, in a way, I'm a little bit like a goalie. Where you really notice me is if I really mess something up. But by and large, if you do your job the way you should, people, well, that was a good game. But again, I don't know that anybody's ever stormed to the box office and demanded a refund on one of the off nights, perhaps, where I wasn't there. So I go in with that. But I also like to go in with the attitude that if you go to a game on December 10th to see the Los Angeles Kings, that experience should be the same as if you were in the Garden in June for Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Final. Now, is the crowd going to be a bit more ratcheted up and everything else? Probably. There's a little extra vibe in the building in the playoffs for sure. There's a little extra vibe in the building depending on what's on the line in the game. And, maybe it's a home and home with the team where there was a lot of stuff that happened the first game, and now they come back to the Garden, and that emotion carries over without a doubt. But from a game presentation standpoint, I think the fans deserve, from what we give them in the building, for that experience to be the same, whether it's opening night, middle of the season, or last game of the playoffs.
Well, Joe, we might not buy the ticket to hear you, but you're definitely part of the show for sure. You do a great job.
I appreciate it.
Without a doubt. I can't think of
I got
any other
another-
announcers. We do some traveling around to other arenas, and I can't think of any other announcer that does it with as much energy as you do. I guess lack of a better word. So, like Coach had said, it's kind of part of the show for sure. Okay, Coach.
Any like I know with the Yankees, Bob Shepard, certain Yankee players wanted him to say things a certain way. Any players come up to you and say, you know, can you say it like this? Can you do it? Anything happen
No.
like that with management, coaches? Nothing. It's all on you, huh?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, I suppose if they really didn't like the way I was doing it, I might hear something, kind of like when I was saying HENRIIIIIIIIK LUNDQVIST.
Right.
But that's probably the most prominent one. But by and large, just kind of go and do it. I
Nice.
usually do it at some point. Try and get the locker room and introduce myself to guys that I haven't met yet and see if they have anything to say. But for the most part, they just say, "Hey, how's it going?" and off you go.
Because I'm thinking a slap shot too, where the GM comes in and starts yelling at the PA guy and the radio guy and throwing stuff at him. Maybe Tortorella came in and said something, juice the crowd up or something. I don't know.
You know what? I think, Coach, I think a lot of the players and the coaches are so focused on the game. Sometimes I wonder if they even heard a word that was said throughout the course of the game. The better chance you have is kind of a TV timeout and something's going on and they're just sitting there waiting for the game to start. Where I really notice, players on both teams are kind of paying attention to stuff is when whether it's tribute things or, like the veteran or the soldier comes home from a deployment and meets the family, or they do sometimes it's ones where they give a veteran a home or something like that. They're kind of paying attention to that stuff. But I think on a lot of what's going on in the game itself, although that being said, if I'm not mistaken, I think it was Dan Girardi. Just by saying Dan Girardi, we're going years back. I believe there was somebody put something on Twitter one night of him sitting there and basically mouthing along as I did the starting lineups. He was on the bench that night. And as and on defense numbered, 8J, whoever. I'm had to go back and try and think of a number of a guy, but he was kind of just mimicking along the starting lineup as I was reading it. It was kind of funny because I replied to it. I joked with him. I never got a response. I said, hey, I really appreciate it. I'm flattered. Is there any way I could ask you for a couple lessons on how to skate backwards better? And I never got a response on that one.
I mean, it's got to be. They might not say anything, but boys will be boys. It's cool when you announce their name for a starting lineup.
Yeah,
it Madison Square Garden. They got to be like, wow, they're paying attention to that.
Definitely for the first time, I would say.
I don't care who you are.
Yeah, I mean, I like to think. I will admit, I get a little bummed out when it's especially a rookie, but also somebody who's new to the team, and they score that first goal on the road. I get a little bummed out that his first as a New York Ranger, his first, National Hockey League goal. I like to put a little extra in that. I wanted to put a little extra emphasis the other night when Adam Fox was back and in the starting lineup, and it worked out that he was the first guy being announced. Nice. So, there's some moments there you hope you capture and make it memorable for folks.
Nice.
So you do the entire opening night announcement as well, PA announcement, like when they do the whole roster for the opening night ceremony.
Yeah, that's just you come in. It's a little extra rehearsal time, and it's more because there's so many moving parts for videos and cameras and everything else. I'd like to say that it's something really different for me, but really, opening night, season after season, is pretty much the same drill. The names are a little bit different, but for the most part, it's pretty straightforward from what I have to do. But yeah, that's one of the big nights where you actually get to recognize everybody on the team. That's where Cass Marks and guys like that on the the bench staff. It's good to recognize those guys because that's really the only time we get to do it.
Benoit Allaire.
Absolutely.
One quick starting lineup question, because Coach Ed and I are both coaches, and we get hounded for our starting lineups. How does Peter Laviolette, I guess, submit the starting lineup, and at what point do you get it?
So when I first started, it's the same anywhere. It's the visitors have to put in their starting lineup first, and the official scorers would actually have to go to the locker room, get this official lineup sheet that the league had. And it was one of those, it was, carbon copy kind of thing. And it was 3 or 4 copies of it. And they would have one that was an official lineup that stayed in all the information that went back to the league. The second copy went to the other team. Excuse me. And then they kept the bottom copy. But then, so they would have to take the one copy over to the Ranger coach, whoever it may be, and go, okay, here's their lineup. And he'd look and go, okay, this is the line we're going to start, and make his decisions. But now everything's done electronically. They have there's an app for that, folks. And they literally, there's an app that we go to that has the roster report that you can see if you're on NHL.com, and the coaches fill that out and submit it. And every once in a while, you get a thing to say, hey, your game, game number 305, your game is starting soon. Please submit your starting lineup if they're approaching a deadline or something. And so don't even have to go see them anymore to see how they do it. Tom Rennie, it was almost like a game for them. And they'd have a different thing they would do with the lineup, and they'd see if the scorer could figure out how they put the roster, which sometimes made it a little more time consuming to put everything together and figure out scratches, because it wasn't always done numerically. Sometimes he'd group everybody by nationality, or one time he tried to do it by, years of service in the league. One time it was, the scoring list kind of thing, but there's always little different things he would do sometimes just to keep everybody on their toes.
Yeah. So,
but now it's all electronic. We open up an app, wait for the visitors team to pop up, wait for the Rangers team to pop up, and pull all the information from there.
So then you make your little note when you post on Instagram?
Yeah, that's just the thing I post on Instagram is real. That's just the page that we have. I have a whole binder with all the different announcements. Hey, fans, get 15% off tonight at the team stores, whatever it may be. 25% if you use your Chase card. And so we have that whole script, and that's just the starting lineup script that we have in the book that I fill out every game, not only to post on social media, but I always fill it out. I wouldn't want it to be, that moment where all of a sudden, whatever your brain goes, oh shoot, who's number 22? So I always write it out.
Nice. Or the app's not working at the time or something crazy.
If the app's not working, then it becomes a bit of a scramble. It's only happened a couple of times. They've gotten it down pretty good over the past few years. But it would be somebody would have to scramble downstairs and say, things aren't working. We need your lineup. And then it's a phone call, and we just go over everything.
So I got to ask you on the starting lineups, the line brawl with the Devils.
Yep.
Stu Bickle, Brandon Prust, and Mike Rupp start the game. When you got
two things from that. Well, you kind of knew what was coming. You see the lineup. You announce the lineup. They line up for the face-off, and Stu Bickle's in the center circle.
Right.
And you're thinking, okay. So 2 things out of that. I still joke with the official scores, and they go, come on, somebody has to win the face-off. I said it's almost criminal that Stu Bickle won the face-off. Nothing against Stu Bickle. But I think to win a face-off, especially in the National Hockey League, each player should have to at least try to play the puck.
Swat at the puck.
Which did not happen, as we all know. Right. I believe the official time of those penalties was 3 seconds. Because I remember kind of doing everything, and I said, at the time of the penalties, 3 seconds. Kind of like that. But the funny story there. So then guys are all packed in the box, and I usually didn't talk to guys when they're in the penalty box. I kind of left them alone. But then there was a stoppage in play, and they're kind of looking around, and Stu Bickle happened to be on the end. And I just looked at him. I said, I usually don't talk to you guys. And he knew he was in the penalty box enough. He goes, yeah, you never say anything to us. I said, but I got to ask you, when's the last time you ever took a face-off? And he laughed. He goes, I've never taken a face-off in my life. He said, even when I was a kid in junior, if I played on the wing and the center got thrown out, the other wing took the face-off. He goes, I never took a face-off.
That's really funny. That is awesome.
Oh man,
I'd love to know the conversation between the coach and them when he put that lineup out. Do you think he had to say anything, or they just knew?
I would think when you saw the lineup, you kind of, all right, we kind of know what our job is here. Let's not
Yeah,
mess it up.
That's it. Yeah,
You know, it's one of those that if you didn't drop the gloves, that might have been where you messed it up. But yeah, I think when there was a little buzz, all of a sudden everybody skates out. You announce the starting lineup, and there was just this little murmur around the building. Like, oh boy, what's going to happen here? Because I think everybody, you know, the 18,000 people all knew whatever's going to happen, it's probably not good. You know, but at least from how the, you know, people say the game should be played, and, you know, explain it to your little kids. Well, sometimes they fight in hockey, but you knew that one was coming for sure.
Yeah, talk about a slap shot moment, huh?
Absolutely. All we needed was somebody to skate along the other bench with the stick and just take out a few people along the way.
Yeah, seriously. That must have been fun. He must have been sitting there like, what the heck? Even looking at the Devils, I think it was like Cam Jansen. I can't remember who else was on there. Maybe I can't remember, but it was intense. The
way things are now with all the betting stuff, if you'd had enough time, that once those lineups came out, you know, I think the quick prop bet would have been, what's the over under on the time of the penalty? And it probably would have been 2 or 3 seconds. Well, you know.
Yeah, seriously. Well, you know, Joe, thanks for spending 45 minutes with us. We really appreciate it. You know, just awesome interview, and it's that, you know, you've had an interesting career. Hopefully we see you at the Garden. We'll have to stop by. You know, actually I saw you once at the Garden a couple of years ago, and I saw you come out of the thing, and you were like getting a drink or something in where the fans were, and I was like, they don't have like a special place for you guys to go get like a soda? Like,
not anymore. Not now that we've moved up to the 8th floor. So,
or bring it to you.
You'd have to run all the way downstairs. So sometimes we have bottles of water, but sometimes, you know, maybe I'll run down the concourse and pay a little bit too much for a cup of Dunkin' or something.
So when you were down low, they had like a special place for you guys to get like snacks. Or
you could run into the media room, and they had a old little soda machine and all, but they don't do that anymore ever since COVID. So that's another one of the downsides since COVID. So.
Damn.
Wow. Oh well.
Well, we really appreciate you coming on. It was a blast to hearing all the stories and stuff, and you know, keep doing what you do at the Garden. You make it fun, and you know, I'll keep mimicking you. You know, so I'm looking forward to the future Ranger names that you pronounce.
I appreciate it. Appreciate you guys having me.
I still believe that you're in the shower practicing. I gotta.
Before you get up, is there anything else you want to plug? Mikey just threw up your Instagram for our fans. I mean, fans, it's a great follow. Like I said, you get to see a live, pretty close to live announcement from Joe. But Joe, is there anything else?
And bear with me if there's a bit of a delay there, because I'm a one-man crew on all that. At one point, I've moved up a little bit. I think I went to a dollar store or something, and I got a little phone stand to hold my phone instead of putting it up on like a roll of tape or something, and leaning it up against the mic stand kind of thing. So I've moved up a little bit in that regard. I figured out last game that if I post directly from my camera app to Instagram, sometimes it cuts it off after like 15 seconds. And so I need to go directly into Instagram and pull the video from my phone from the Instagram app for that not to happen. So it's trial by error for me at times as we go through this whole thing. And if there's a whole bunch of goals in a row, I may or may not get a goal announcement because I was trying to edit one and then somebody else scored, and I set my phone down and made the goal announcement. And crap, I forgot to record that one. But it is what it is.
Well, if you need a social media guy, you need any advice, you can let me know, Joe. I got you.
I might have to take you up on that.
You got it. I'm always available.
Yeah. Are you still doing play-by-play for NYC MLS, by the way?
I'm not. That ended last season. The MLS went to a whole package because they moved everything to Apple TV.
Oh, that's right.
They have a whole subscription thing on Apple TV, and they had a lot of people to pick from. I wasn't one of the ones picked for the first year, but we'll see what happens in the future. I was a little disappointed. This is the first year of Major League Soccer since they started in 1996, where I believe it's the first year where I didn't do at least one game. So I did do a radio game for NYCFC from a U.S. Open Cup match. So I got something under my belt, and I still do some play-by-play stuff for SiriusXM for their soccer channel. So I did the All-Star game in the summer, and I've got the MLS Cup final on Saturday in Columbus, and I'm first flight out Sunday morning to get back for the Kings game.
Awesome.
Nice. That's awesome. Good
Sounds
for you.
great. All right, we're looking forward to it, Joe. Thanks a lot for coming on.
Thank you.
Joe,
Appreciate it.
Thanks,
Keep
Joe.
up the good work.
All right.
We'll
Good night.
be
All the
in touch.
best.
Thanks,
Have a
Joe.
good night.